Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Okay. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you? Yeah.
Doing okay.
Work, homeschooling. It's wearing you down?
We're a week into homeschooling, virtual schooling, and it is harder than it was pre-summer because it's more structured and there's more things the kids have to do. It's just a lot more work than it was before. Like before, there was like one Zoom call a week per kid that they had to be on. The schedule was very loose. The assignments were pretty light. And it wasn't good long term. I mean, I wanted them to have a lot more structure and like actual teaching happening over the Zooms. And now that's happening, but it's super difficult, like piecing together the logistics of it. And we've got all three of them at home and we're working and I have control issues. Like I'm not sure that I can even give up I'm not digging a lot of the daycare options for the ages of my kids of like them sitting. Anyways, doesn't matter. It's taken some adjusting, taken some getting used to. That's why my was.
Is that why you're sighing so deeply as we get started on this show?
Yeah. But you know what I am excited to do tonight? Talk about some health savings accounts, flexible. That is like a way to cheer me up after a long day, you know?
I know, me too. Talking about tax advantaged accounts. This is nothing caps off a day like this.
I know. After a long day, some people want to sit and enjoy a glass of wine or a cold beer. I just want to talk about FSAs with you, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, let's read a quick comment because earlier tonight I got a text from a friend in the neighborhood and who has kids at my kid's school who I've always really liked. She sent me such a nice text and I just thought I would read it.
All right.
So she said, "Hi, Maggie. Started listening to your podcast a couple of weeks ago and I've really enjoyed it. We did Financial Peace 8 or so years ago," which is a Dave Ramsey thing, by the way. So we did Financial Peace 8 or so years ago and we were really diligent for 4 or 5 years, but we have fallen out of some habits. Your podcast has motivated us to pick up those old habits. Hope y'all keep it up.
That's great.
That was such a nice comment because we've shared many times before, but this is why we do this, right? We want to encourage better financial habits, people to just talk openly about how they're doing. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I love getting messages like that.
Yeah. And the other cool thing I'll share, Mike, which you know a little bit about because I called you at one point during this, but one of my best friends was in town, she lives out of town and she's one of my like oldest, bestest friends. And she was in town for a girls' weekend for our birthdays last weekend or 2 weekends ago. I don't even know. I've lost track of time. 2 weekends ago. And she had recently gone through a number of changes and financially and has really had a very like hands-off approach to her finances for a very long time. And now she has to be hands-on. She's on her own and she's got to figure it all out. And I had such a fun time with her. Like she wanted to like go through everything, right? And like we did a net worth tracker. She now knows her net worth. She had no idea what it was before. And now I'm like, look, you can track this every month and know that you're moving in a positive direction. She's going to pay off her student loans, which she's had for 20 plus years. And just the conversation of having like conversations with your friends about money. I had her like load everything into Mint and set up Mint. And the amount she was spending on groceries was like, she had no idea. And it was staggering. It was like $1,400 a month.
Oh my God.
For her and one child. And there were just some things where she was like, yeah, I had no idea that I'm spending that much. So this is the stuff that I find so much fun and just eye-opening and enlightening to people who want to have that conversation and are ready to have it. And at one point we called Mike to get some advice on debating, paying off student loans with cash she had and other things. So
that's great. And this is also why we created those templates on our new Etsy store. So net worth tracker, expense tracker, and the mortgage payoff tool. I think it's probably good just to remind people that We have these Excel spreadsheets now available online, so you guys can download these and start modeling out to a better financial future. So today, we're going to be talking about the grouping of account types: health savings accounts, flexible spending accounts,
and dependent care flexible spending accounts, which some people just call
DCFSA.
Yeah, some people call it DCFSA. Some people just call them FSAs for flexible spending accounts. We're going to talk through what they each are, just, all the pros and cons and kind of considerations of each type of account.
These types of accounts seem to be the most confusing for people for a couple of reasons. It's not widely communicated what the benefits are, and the limits aren't very large, so it doesn't seem like it's such a big deal. The accounts are very similar, and so a lot of people just get overwhelmed by the choice and then just forget it and don't do anything.
Yeah, and they also come out to you during if you work for like a medium to large size company, maybe even a lot of small companies, these are available to you, and they come out to you during annual benefits enrollment, which is within the next, couple months usually at most companies. But they come out to you with like 20 other benefits, right? Your medical benefits and things that you're sort of more incentivized to make sure you get right. And actually, speaking of that, Mike, we were talking about doing a episode on how to choose your benefits, which we should do because that
I'm down.
Time period is coming up soon. Another exciting Tuesday night for us to record a fun topic. So we'll do an episode on that soon. But yeah, there's so many choices that a lot of people overlook how valuable these types of accounts can be, because these are all tax advantaged accounts that can really help lower your taxable income. And because of that, there's just a lot of financial benefits to all of these accounts, especially if you understand them and leverage them properly.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, the takeaway is going to be that if you have them available, you need to take advantage of them and max them out. So if you don't want to listen to the rest of the episode, just take this key message away.
There is almost no reason you should not be using these accounts if they're available to you and if you spend money in these categories, right?
That's right. So let's start with FSA.
That stands for Flexible Spending Account. What's an FSA, Mike?
An FSA is a tax-advantaged savings account to be used for qualified medical expenses. So you contribute money from your paycheck pre-tax, like a 401k contribution. It goes into a separate account, and then you pay your medical bills from that. And when you do, the money is tax-free. So if you were to take the money into your checking account and then pay a bill, you'd pay income tax and then pay it. But this way, you save the tax and you get to pay directly your medical bills.
So Mike, let's do like quick math for people. If I have $1,000 in medical expenses on average in each year, which could be my co-pays, prescriptions, different, like a procedure I have to have that comes out of my deductible, whatever. That $1,000, if I do that as an FSA instead of just paying $1,000 out of pocket for it, that is above and beyond medical insurance premiums. But if I pay $1,000 in expenses a year and I do that pre-tax as an FSA, and I'm at a 40% tax rate, that means I just got that $1,000 for about $600, right? As some quick and dirty math.
And so you are definitely making money in this equation, and that's why you need to be taking advantage of this account.
Exactly. So it's tax-free. You are not taxed on that income.
That's right.
They're pulling it out before you have to pay taxes to the government, which is why it's considered a tax-advantaged account. And that's the number one benefit to all of these types of accounts we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. So let's go through some other things that you should understand about FSAs. The first one, Mike, is that you need to choose the amount you're going to put into an FSA during your annual enrollment's benefit period. And then it's going to come out of your paycheck on a prorated basis throughout the year. So you've got to do your best to estimate how much you'll have in expenses every year. And I remember even when I was younger trying to like estimate, I'd sometimes put like $300 in and then realize actually I spend closer to $500. And then once I had kids, I was spending more. And so you just got to kind of do your best to feel it out. If you know that you're going to have a certain type of procedure, or like your kid's going to need braces or something like that, you can plan ahead.
And the reason you need to plan ahead for an FSA is because at the end of the year, you lose the money that's unspent. It doesn't roll over. You don't keep it like a 401k. If you think you're going to have $300 of expenses, you should put in $300, because if you put in $500 and you don't spend it, you're going to lose $200.
Yeah, you can spend it on some things that you could just, a lot of people like at the end of the year are just buying, like, I don't think Band-Aids qualify anymore, though there was a time when they did. But there are certain types of like prescription or over-the-counter medicine and other supplies, or like acupuncture or certain types of medical massage that you could try to kind of like use up the rest of your money on. And I do see people who all of a sudden realize like, oh, I got an extra $100 or $200. It's like use it or lose it. So I'm going to go to the chiropractor or something that I wouldn't typically do. And so you want to be, cautious.
Or $1,000 on Band-Aids. Apparently that's a thing.
There was a time, like I'm telling you, like 15 years ago, the rules were a little bit looser of what you could expense to an FSA. And I remember one year buying like a ridiculous amount of like first aid kits and first aid supplies because I had overshot how much money I needed. And I was like, well, I don't want to lose this money. So I'm probably still using Band-Aids from 2004. And
then, of course, the IRS limits the amount of money you can put into this account because they don't want to just give you tax-free income for, $500,000 if that's what you earn. So in 2020, the limit per person is $2,650. So you can only get the tax benefit on that amount. You will be capped by your employer for that contribution.
And you and your spouse can both use that cap. And like you guys know I'm like in a blended family. And so we had like my stepdaughter needed braces this year. We were sharing in the expense with her mom. And so we both can max out our FSAs to cover expenses like that.
If you have a family medical plan, that number doubles and you and your spouse can contribute that amount.
We talked a little bit about how you decide how much money to put into an FSA, right? Do your best to estimate based on what you anticipate happening in the year. And that's like forecasting anything, right? You just do your best. Decide if you want to shoot low or shoot high, but that's a personal decision that you need to make.
Yeah.
I will say one thing you can do is you can call your doctors. So I've called doctors and said like, hey, how much does this procedure cost? Or how much does this cost? Just so you have a sense of what some things might cost so that you can plan a little bit better ahead of time also.
Oh, that's smart.
The other important thing about FSAs, and it's actually what inspired this episode, because somebody leaving my company asked me, what happens to my FSA money when I leave? And I was like, I don't know. That's a good question. Let me look into it. And then it inspired, we should probably just do an episode on all these topics. I did learn that when you leave your FSA, it is tied to that job. So any money left unused in your FSA when you leave your job goes back to your employer. You read the fine print of any sort of severance package of how long you have to file those claims to get the reimbursement. The good news is FSAs are prorated throughout the year. So if you put $1,000 into your FSA for the year and you left a company mid-year, you would have only put $500 into it. And so the thought is you will have probably used that amount of money. And again, it's use it or lose it at that point. So if you leave in the middle of the year and you've got $500 and you haven't claimed anything yet, you need to hurry up and with the amount of notice period you have of leaving that job, try to use $500 worth of medical expenses or you will lose it. So do your best to, get creative and find something useful.
So FSAs are great plans. Now, the confusing part for people is when we get into how do you choose between an FSA and an HSA. And the difference is, one of the main differences is it is based on what deductible your medical plan is. So the IRS says that if you have a high deductible plan, which they classify as being $1,400 or above for individuals or $2,800 for families, that's your deductible that you have to meet on your plan. That's a high deductible plan. That means you qualify for an HSA. If you have a low deductible plan, you qualify for an FSA. And so part of the decision for which savings account to use is based on what you choose for your medical plan.
Yeah, it's kind of like the decision's made for you, right? So
That's
right.
I
have a high deductible savings plan, so I use an HSA, but I've only had that for the past 2 or 3 years. Prior to that, I used an FSA because I had a, not high deductible plan.
Now, the FSA is a good plan. The HSA is an amazing plan.
It's even better.
I'm so enthusiastic about this because it serves so many purposes. The HSA works in the same way as the FSA. You put in pre-tax dollars, but there's a couple big differences. One, the contribution limit is higher. So you can, going into next year, 2021, you can contribute up to $3,600 for an individual and $7,200 for a family. So you get to put in more money pre-tax. And again, if you spend it on medical expenses, it's tax-free. So it works the same way mechanically as the FSA. But here is the really cool part.
Drum roll. No, I was excited. This is the best part of an HSA is you don't have to spend it in that year.
Right. You can roll it over indefinitely. It's yours to keep.
Ever.
It's like a 401k, and you can spend it later in your life on medical expenses and still get the same great tax benefit.
That's why, just to clarify, that's why it's called a health savings account versus an FSA, even though they both end in SA. FSA is flexible spending account versus HSA is health savings account.
You know what, Maggie? That has never occurred to me.
Did you not realize that? I'm just saying it, like, the way to remember is what the words actually stand for. It's called a savings account because that's what it is.
Wow.
It is a savings account for your health expenses.
Learn something every day.
I rarely get to teach you anything new. I'm so excited.
Yeah, that kind of blew my mind, actually.
I told you, I thought you were like, I saw your face when I said that, and I thought you were going to be like, Maggie, people know that. You don't need to say that. And you're like, I'm so excited that I've
thank you.
impressed you with some new knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
I'm telling
that.
you, you cheered me up from a rough day of virtual schooling and working. So I knew
I'm glad.
this would cheer you.
All right, so the last great thing about the HSA, because you might be thinking, well, what if I put $7,000 in this thing every single year for 40 years? How am I ever going to spend all that? You don't have to spend it on medical expenses. At age 65, you can withdraw it for any reason without a penalty. You would only pay taxes on the earnings you've made on that account.
Wait a minute. I didn't actually know this.
Oh.
So you just paid me back for what I just taught you about savings. Look at that.
Good.
I had no idea. That makes me feel even better about this.
Yeah.
It truly.
Account. So it actually acts as a retirement account. We always say max this stuff out because you always want to take advantage of the tax benefits.
Yep.
But there's an additional reason to max out an HSA because it doesn't matter if you use it for medical expenses. You can use it for whatever you want later in your life. And,
yeah, that's great.
And it will either grow tax-free. You can use it for medical expenses later in your life after 65, or it grows tax-deferred, which would be if you were to pull it out for non-medical expense reasons.
Yeah, and the other thing about an HSA, just to break down a real example, is like I've used an HSA for the past few years as a savings vehicle, an additional tax-free way to save and continue to diversify my savings also. And so I now have about $10,000 in a health savings account, and I can use it anytime. So if I have a big ER bill in 2 years and I want to use it as a bit of an emergency fund for medical expenses, which is how many might use it, I can use it there. If I can afford those expenses as they come up, like I don't pull out of it at all right now. Even when I have a $50 copay or when I have a $500 visit for something, I'm just paying cash for that visit because I want to keep this as an additional savings vehicle. And so you don't have to get any reimbursement from it, even when you have medical expenses, which I just think is worth mentioning because that may not be obvious to some people. So you can truly use it as a savings account, even though you have medical expenses that are popping up throughout the year. But if you can afford to pay for them, just keep this as a bit of an emergency fund, a retirement account for an extra account so that if you make it all the way to 65 and you don't need it, you just get that extra amount of cash then. Again, this is an amazing savings vehicle. And it may often be the reason that would tip you into wanting to kind of take a little bit of risk on a high deductible medical plan also, which we can talk about more as we talk about, weighing your different medical plan benefits.
Whole other episode on how to choose your medical plans. That stuff's complicated. But point is, HSA, a fantastic tool, and you should just max it out because the benefits will be there even if you don't decide to use it for medical expenses.
Yeah, and the other cool thing is when you leave a company, we were just talking about an FSA, which you have to spend it really quickly when you leave a company because it will otherwise go away. An HSA is yours. You keep it with you forever. You can use it whenever. It doesn't matter when you're, coming and going from companies. It will stick with you just like a 401k would.
And like a 401k, you can invest the money in these accounts. So they will be set up with investment choices, or sometimes they will be self-directed and you could buy whatever you want. So make sure that you are investing this money. I would recommend that you keep some of it in cash because the way these accounts work is you get a little debit card and you go and pay your bills. And what you don't want to do is have 100% of your money invested and not realize it and then try to go pay something and then your charge doesn't go through.
But I mean, on that point, Mike, I would challenge people who can afford to pay for their medical expenses as they happen throughout the year shouldn't even use that card, right? They should think of this as an additional diversified savings account, an investment vehicle. It's if you can't and you need to also use it for medical expenses as they arise, that may be your personal situation. But if you can afford to pay cash as things come up for your medical expenses, it's better to do that and to truly leave this in savings and keep it invested, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I think that is a very valid approach. It's certainly much easier just to use your debit card and pay it and be done with it. But if you are interested in being as aggressive as possible with your savings and growth, that strategy also works.
I'd also argue your comment of it's easier to just use your debit card. It is, but you don't need to use your HSA debit card. Just use your normal debit card that comes out of your bank
but then
account.
you don't need to process any reimbursement. You don't need to submit a receipt later. So it's just, you're done.
Oh no, I'm saying don't, like, you should just pay for it out of your money and you still don't need to process any reimbursement. But you're saying if you're going to reimburse.
Oh, if you're going to reimburse it.
I'm just saying I don't even encourage people to spend that money. I think they should just let it sit there. The other thing I would note, because I ran into this problem myself when I was trying to make sure that my HSA funds were invested in something. I kind of discovered recently they were all just like sitting in cash or in like some sort of automatic default fund that wasn't making any money. And so I went to go and make the change to put it into some funds. And there was a program that was called like My Advisor, which is just part of whatever company my HSA is with. And it was offering to kind of help me make investment suggestions. And I was like, oh, that's nice. It's just going to like, give me some suggestions. And it's not very, I'll just say you had to read the fine print. It was not very clear that there was a monthly percentage charge to use that My Advisor tool. And so just be careful when you, especially in programs like this that are kind of like company sponsored, because it's not even your company making that money. It's the investment company that runs the HSA that's making that money. They're making money to give you suggestions that you could very easily figure out on your own and, spend 5 minutes reading an article or doing some research on. And I was shocked because I was like, it's a little misleading. It was a little tricky of making me think it was like a nice little widget they had as part of the system that was going to charge me a fee that was going to, be a couple $100 a year. So wasn't worth it.
No free lunches, Maggie. You should know this.
I know. There's no free My Advisor tools out there.
But I think that advice applies to every type of account
You're right.
you would ever want to open. Read the fine print.
Exactly.
And as you know, I love reading fine print.
Mike does love reading fine print. It's
all right.
So much fun.
So let's pivot a little bit. FSAs and HSAs are pretty similar, and you can only choose one. Dependent care FSAs, totally separate. You can have them in conjunction with your HSA or your FSA, but applies only to childcare expenses.
Well, not childcare, dependent care. So it can apply to if you have an aging parent and you need to pay for at-home care, anything where you need to pay for at-home care for somebody so that you can go to work.
Oh.
So it's not just, look at that. Did I just teach you
God, we are just teaching each other so much stuff tonight. This is amazing.
So much fun.
We really should read our own notes before
Nick.
we do these episodes.
I know, right? That's funny. Okay. So yes, dependent care can include preschool, before or after school care programs, summer camps, childcare, adult daycare, adult home help. Again, it has to be for something where you have to go to work, which we'll talk about more in a minute.
The financial benefit of this account is exactly like the HSA and the FSA. You put in pre-tax dollars and then spend it tax-free. But like the FSA, it's a use it or lose it. And so you want to only contribute at least what you're going to be spending in the year.
So this one's a little bit easier to predict what you're going to be spending than the FSA one is, because it's hard to predict what your medical expenses are for the year. It's a little bit easier to predict what your daycare costs are or, other sorts of things like that. And again, one thing that I think is interesting because it's happened during this whole COVID thing is you can't change that amount unless there's a qualified event that allows you to change your overall benefits, which sometimes can be like you got married, you had a child, you got divorced, etc. That is a approved qualified event. But I noticed that I got a letter from our company, I don't know, a month or two ago, that was basically saying that we could change the amounts in our FSAs or DCFSAs because so many people had massive changes to like childcare costs and medical costs and other things because of the quarantine. And I thought that was a really nice feature that they basically said, like, look, this is a global pandemic, qualifies as an unexpected event that would allow you to adjust your amount. If you had put like 5,000 into this and then you didn't get your money back because you couldn't submit qualified receipts, that would be pretty terrible. And so it's very nice that during a time like this, you know, people are being reasonable and letting people make adjustments.
So the limit is $5,000. $5,000 for a family, $2,500 for an individual. But I think for most people who send their kids regularly to daycares or camps, I think, unfortunately, your expenses are going to far exceed $5,000. Yeah. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do this. It just means you only get a benefit on that first $5,000.
So like Mike said, there's those limits. And you and your spouse can each have your own DSAs, but ultimately the combined annual contribution at a household level cannot go beyond those federal limits, which again is like $5,000 if you're filing jointly. So that means, you know, one of you could do $4,000, one of you could do $1,000. It doesn't really matter. You just can't go over that total amount. And then the other thing that I did not know about, but that is very interesting when I was reading more about these, is that there is a unique rule on dependent care accounts that your maximum annual contribution cannot exceed the lesser of your or your spouse's salaries. So essentially, if you're a single person, you cannot contribute more than you earn in a tax year. And if you're married, you cannot contribute more than you or your spouse earn. So if you earn $50,000 or $500,000, but your spouse earns $1,000 a year from some small job that they have, then your maximum DCA contribution cannot exceed $1,000. So I thought this was interesting, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm assuming this is to avoid someone who has like a stay-at-home spouse also filing for government benefits, when the purpose of this is to help you cover costs of child independent and, you know, adult care, et cetera, while you're at work. And so I think they're like, well, if you're not actually at work, then you don't get to take the tax benefit, which makes sense.
It's also like a Roth IRA where the contribution limit is $6,000, but you can't contribute to a Roth more than your income in the year. Yeah,
which makes it, which again, I think they're trying to limit who's able to take the benefits, which
they want to make sure that you are still paying some taxes. You can't just take all these benefits when you don't have any income.
I'm not like, I don't lose sleep over rules like that. I'm like, that's fair.
All right. So when you leave a company, your dependent care FSA, like an FSA, does not follow with you. So the HSA you can keep forever. It is an independent account. Dependent care FSA, you will lose it. So you want to make sure that you spend all that money in the year. You want to make sure that you spend the money if you are intending to leave your company.
I mean, and this rule can kind of mess you up a little bit depending on when you leave a company, because a lot of people's highest childcare expenses are in the summer, depending on the age of their kids. And if you leave a company in March and you had a prorated equal amount, which is how it works, coming out every time, you might have kind of like overshot a little bit because you weren't going to need a lot of that money until summer, but you're going to have to use, you know, you're going to have to be able to file some receipts. But like Mike said, most people's childcare costs are way over the actual annual limit. So hopefully not too many people get caught up in that issue.
Should we wrap up with our 3 key takeaways on these accounts?
Our first takeaway is you should always leverage these tax advantaged accounts if they are available to you by your employer.
Key takeaway number 2 is that the benefit of these accounts is the tax savings. Contributions are made pre-tax, therefore you don't pay income tax on them. And like a 401k, you should be maxing it out to take advantage of that.
And then number 3 would be make sure you're very thoughtful about thinking ahead for the next year to estimate your expenses across dependent care and health medical expenses, because making sure that you estimate and forecast that well, which you'll get better at over time, can really help you to best leverage these accounts and most efficiently leverage them and not lose money or feel like you have to waste money on things you don't need at the end of the year.
Yeah. All right, Maggie, this was fun. We taught each other some new things. This was exciting.
Great discussion.
All right, should we do a Mike's Minute on the Mic? It's been a while since we've done one.
Oh, has it? I feel like we do one every time.
I don't think so, do we?
Are you missing them?
I'm kind of missing it. Hit me with one.
Okay. It's going to come to me. Hold on. Okay. I got a Mike's Minute on the Mic for you, okay? It's on topic for this show.
Okay.
Well, you got 60 seconds to answer.
You're not going to ask me about my
question-
medical history, are you? Because there's HIPAA laws and stuff. I'm not going to share it.
No, I'm not going to ask you about your hips or a hippo. What are you talking about? I'm just kidding. I know what HIPAA is. I'm hip to the HIPAA.
Oh my God.
Sometimes I just make myself laugh.
You can't control
more
it.
than anyone else. I mean, I don't care if no one else laughs at my jokes. That was really funny. Okay, I'm hip to the HIPAA. I'm not going to ask you about your private medical stuff, but I am going to ask you a medical question. So if you had, I know you don't have an FSA anymore. I know you're more on the HSAs because you do high deductible plans now. But if you had an FSA and you had $300 left in December that you had to spend or you were going to lose it, what would you go do? How would you splurge in the medical space to not lose that money?
Oh, well, since you know I'm incapable of splurging, I would buy actual material goods that I could store and then keep for years to come. So medical supplies.
I thought you were gonna say that you could resell on eBay, and I was like, that's brilliant.
Oh,
but
that's
that
a
is
great
brilliant.
idea.
So I'm just helping you to improve your answer.
Thank you for helping me on my answer.
No problem. So are you gonna buy first aid supplies or?
I don't know. Maybe 2,000 ibuprofen pills. 50 pounds of Band-Aids, just load up on the essentials.
Yeah. And will you buy name brand Band-Aids because you can splurge a little bit, like the nice Welly ones from Target?
Absolutely not. I don't even know what Welly Band-Aids are, Maggie.
Oh, Welly's the fancy bougie Band-Aids that Target sells now. They're really cute designs and they come in a little nice tin that my kids love.
What? You buy these?
Yeah.
We buy Band-Aids at the dollar store and then the kids play with them.
That's so funny. Okay, we're going to get off Band-Aids and wrap this one up. So thank you guys for listening. I hope this was helpful. We'd love your feedback because we often sort of oscillate on topics that are on, more structured, harder, what I call hard versus soft topics on things like FSAs, 401ks, etc., versus softer topics like how to practice self-care, finding your passion and loving life, topics like that. So we always love your feedback on what topics are most helpful to you. Sometimes we receive your feedback by seeing which episodes get the most downloads, which is always helpful. Mortgage payoff and self-care were popular episodes, Mike, by the way.
Yeah, they were good.
So if you have been challenged or inspired by anything you have heard today, please rate and review our show. It is super helpful. You can also subscribe to make sure that you never miss an episode.
If you have thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370 or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Have a good night.
Thanks, Maggie. Bye.
Bye.